in this episode of the Critical Oxygen podcast.
The number one thing is we want to revitalize that athlete, get them prepared and focused for the next season.
Welcome to the Critical Oxygen podcast, where we help you optimize your physiology and maximize your endurance potential. I'm your host, Phil Batterson. I have a PhD in molecular exercise physiology, and I'm the founder of Critical Oxygen, where my mission is to build better endurance athletes through remote education and in-person physiological testing. Today, I'm joined by Coach Aaron Geiser, where we're going to talk all about how to take an effective off-season. Aaron Geiser, welcome to the show.
What's going on, buck naked?
No, not fully. I got a little bit of a lip warmer going on, man. Got to stay warm out here.
I just had to make the joke of Seinfeld when George Costanza says if he's going to be a porn actor, what his name would be. So
it's a buck naked. Oh, that's actually kind of funny. See, what's also funny is that I didn't even understand the reference you were giving because I've never watched Seinfeld. So
it's quite sad that you just admitted that and that I actually hang out with you.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I hope we can remain friends after this admonishment of no Seinfeld listening or watching. Because I have heard really good things about it. I just, never jumped on that bandwagon, never jumped on the Friends bandwagon. All the listeners at this point have just shut off this episode. Guys, stay here. Just listen.
Not. It just speaks more about you than everything else.
Yeah, the character, the man behind the mustache, as it were. So Aaron and I, just to actually kind of get back on topic here, we were texting today, and we were talking about, what do we think, like the people want to hear, where are we at in the season, those sort of things. And something I had thought about was that the fact that, Ironman World Championships, or at least like the full distance World Championships, is just wrapped up. The half Ironman World Championships is in about a month or so at the time of this recording. And, for those of you who aren't going to 70.3 World Championships, most likely your season is winding down, wrapping up. So I wanted to get Aaron's take on his approach to, like an effective off season. What's the purpose of an off season in his opinion? And then we'll just kind of go from there because I kind of got some ideas as well. So yeah, Aaron, if you wouldn't mind, just like what is the purpose of the off season in your mind's eye?
So for me, it takes a couple of different shapes. The number one thing is we want to revitalize that athlete, get them prepared and focused for the next season. Because whether an athlete likes to only race 1-2 times or they like to race 7 or 8, that athlete needs to have, especially the one that races more frequently, I feel that it is very important that we do have a point where they do step away, refresh their mind, refresh everything, so the monotony or just the burnout kind of settles out of the mind and gives them kind of a reset and a refresh in that case. The other thing that I see that is important for the off season is starting to work on, each athlete's going to have their own goals that they want to accomplish. Of course, at that point, I have a definite idea of where and what we need to work that athlete to get the most out of them and get them prepared and further along to those goals for the next following season and long term. So off season, I typically do start to sharpen some edges of the sword to improve that athlete's capacity in one dynamic or another across all three phases. Focus on one phase. It kind of depends on the athlete's need, but that is another piece to the off season that I do look at, Phil.
Yeah. I would say, like a few things that you mentioned there. Number one is, using it as a time to get revitalized for more training, to come. Right. And an off season doesn't, and in my opinion, shouldn't just be completely, sedentary, you just let yourself go, do other things like that. It's more of a time of doing maybe less structured, less stressful, sort of activities in a sense, right? You've just come off of training all year, and now let's just like, well, do you like cross country skiing? Do you like snowshoeing? Do you like, doing other activities that you normally wouldn't get to do when you're just training for, say, an Ironman or a marathon or, whatever it is you're training for?
And that's exactly what I was going to say, is it given it an opportunity if that athlete does have other things that they enjoy,
Mm-hmm.
does have, other skill sets that they like to do. I think it's a great time to go out and do that. Whether, like you said, I mean, maybe somebody loves to shoot a bow or something. Like there's other things out there that can just give you an opportunity to step away. And some of the things that you talked about, like the snowshoeing or like the cross country skiing, are great developers for your VO2 max and your cardiovascular
Oh yeah.
system. So those would be things that would play in, but are a completely different taste of the flavor that you had all season. So
Mm-hmm.
it is an opportunity to just kind of expose yourself to other things, but also if you don't have any other things to expose, backing off and just decreasing the volume, a little bit less intensity. And like you said, one of the key components is that it's just, hey, let's take structure off of the calendar for the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, and then let's get back into it at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the removal of structure, we need to delineate between the removal of structure and the removal of any sort of, time of exercising. Like if I were doing this, I'm not doing an off season right at the moment because I'm training for something that's more in like the March, May sort of time frame. So I'll have an off season probably after that. But if I was going into an off season, what I would be doing is I would still have the same 2 hour block of time blocked off on my calendar every single day. It's just a matter of, well, what am I doing now? Is it, oh, I'm just going to go do a hike today for 2 hours?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's something, that you want to start implementing, but it's a reduction again in like, and I will say this, don't go and be like, oh, well, after the first week, I'm feeling pretty recovered. So I'm going to go king of the mountain hunting. I'm going to go on to Zwift and I'm going to try to, do all these races and other things like that. Yes, they may invigorate you and get you motivated to train, but those aren't productive uses for the recuperation time that you're trying to get. You've just beat yourself up for 4, 5, 6, 8, maybe even 10 months. And you need to actually take the foot off the gas pedal, try and maybe there's other things that you could like focus your attention on. Oh, I'm really bad at sleep right now. Maybe take some of that energy that you would use for training, shift it towards I'm going to try my best to get better sleep, and whether that's reducing screen time or whatever it is. So it's an opportunity to focus on different goals and different aspects of your life as well.
And you can also start to develop some other positive habits that can start taking place on a regular basis moving
Mm-hmm.
forward. So whether it be mobility, flexibility, yoga, meditation, other things like that, kind of
Yeah.
build upon what you said, but also probably you did a great job of explaining what we mean by decrease the structure. It's the focus inside that 2 hours is a little bit where the destructuring takes place,
Mm-hmm.
but that the 2 hours is dedicated there. But I think the other piece that we should draw attention to is structuring that time off for the time length that you need. Like you
Mm-hmm.
said, not doing a week and saying, you know what, I feel pretty good. Let's get back into it. Maybe have that structure of this is a 3 week time or this is a 4 week time for me to completely step away. And that is the structure of the the block, I guess, in
Mm-hmm.
that sense is yeah, there's going to be that 2 hours that are built up into the calendar on those particular days that you want to do something, but having that blocked out on your calendar to say this is really the biggest structure that I have is it's going to be 3 weeks or it's going to
Yeah.
be 4 weeks, or if you want it to be longer, it can be longer. Don't feel like it doesn't need to be, but I just kind of follow those because anymore sometimes people have a harder time to getting back depending on their
Right.
motivation or depending on other things that catch their eye. So that would be another piece of the structure pie that I would probably place focus to is, hey, let's make sure that you stay to the course of this is going to be this length of time off.
Yeah. Do you have kind of like a strategy or conversations that you have with an athlete that would give you an inclination of like, oh, this person probably needs about 3 weeks or this person needs more? Or is it, person to person basis and then you kind of just checking in with them like every week or so?
Well, I guess I have a number of athletes that will stop doing triathlons and then we'll throw them in a 10K or a 5K or a
Mm,
marathon. So we we do adjust the type of training, and I think that does do a very good job for them to give them a break and give them the refresh that they need.
hmm.
For the other group of my athletes and other athletes that I talk to, I think it's just kind of asking them the questions and getting what they have planned for the next season. That really probably what's planned for the next season dictates it more for me
Hmm.
than anything else,
Yeah.
because even if you had a heavy race load that we're coming out of, but you're like, you know what, I feel like only racing about 2 or 3 times this next year, fantastic. All right, I'm going to be able to build some time throughout that flow of the season to also give you breaks. It's
Hmm.
that individual that says, you know what, I want to race 6 times. I'm pretty much going after it every month or every 6 or 7 weeks. Okay, well, I have to. I got to give you a little bit more time
Hmm.
off for that athlete to get them prepared because, hey, you're starting your race season in March and you're racing all the way through November or whatever it might be. That's a long time. So I need to give
Yeah.
you a little bit of time because we're not going to be able to do a step away in June or whatever it might be
Right.
for that particular athlete. So I think that's probably a better way to answer your question, Phil, is it's knowing the athlete, but also taking a look at what they have coming down the pike or what their hopes and goals are for the following season.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one thing that I just thought about too is like if you're getting to the end of a race season or something like that, and you are so burnt out that you need months and months and months of say like recovery or like off season or whatever it is, that's okay. But this is a time to reevaluate. Maybe I'm going a little bit too hard with like the goals and the racing that I actually have planned out to begin with. So taking a step back and using this time of, your 3 to 4 weeks, or maybe it's shifting, oh, I'm gonna run a 10K now because doing like the volume for a successful 10K is much different than the volume for a successful, say Ironman. So shifting those sort of things should alleviate again a little bit of the pressure of the monotony of what you've been doing for the last say 8 months, and just shifting or thinking about reflecting on what has been going on over the course of the last season, and then trying to get into the the new season with the goal of, oh, this is going to be something that I have to stay consistent with, or that I'm aiming to um not be so burnt out that I have to take 3 months off or whatever it is.
Another thing that I would also probably add to this would be if you're an athlete that has started to just kind of crawl your way to some of these events or the last event. So you really feel 3 weeks or 4 weeks out when you should be having kind of your biggest finish to the block before you get into a taper, and you're just like, I don't feel like doing this.
Hmm.
I would also have that kind of conversation with the athlete to, yeah, we need to take a little bit of a longer time away or just diversify your workouts a little bit, because if and that again typically happens if I feel like the season is too long.
Yeah.
But if you just are somebody that, man, I got 4 weeks left for this event, I should be wanting to like put these final efforts in and you can't get to it, or you're having a hard time turning over the engine,
Hmm.
I would almost have the conversation with the athlete also in that case. If it's the middle of the season and they have another race week or month later or whatever it might be, might have that conversation of, okay, we might need to look at this just a little bit of a different way,
Hmm.
or I'm going to give you a little bit of a break, or I'm going to completely change your workouts just to kind of get your mindset a little bit more positive.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's I really wish I knew more about, kind of like human psychology and stuff like that. But I do know that, shifting things, and changing things that seem sort of like monotonous in a sense is can be extremely positive, for, like the mindset going into things. It's new, it's kind of exciting. So, shifting that, and then also again working within those constraints of the time that you've set aside to work out. Maybe you've seen all of these, quote unquote hybrid athletes who are like really strong and also really good with endurance stuff, and you want to start to try to lift weights, for example, and you want to start to implement that. Maybe that's like a new goal that you would pick up during the off season. Hey, I really, want to try to get stronger because I know how good it is, to like for health and longevity and, for resiliency in the sport. Maybe having like a shifting goals is also a good idea. Cause also like, I think off seasons can be a little challenging, especially they were for me when I was in high school, when it was just kind of like, oh yeah, just kind of make sure you run every day, and there's no like specific outcome or goals or whatever it is that you're actually like pursuing. It's just kind of just go do it, and you're like, well, what am I actually doing it for? So you have to have some sort of level of like goal that you can fall back on if the motivation isn't necessarily there. So this is you talked about this in the very beginning. This is a perfect time to come up with a goal for the offseason after you've decided how long your offseason is, whether it's running a 10K, whether it's, like I said, doing something with like strength training, whether it's attacking some sort of like nagging injury that has been bothering you for an extended period of time. Offseason is a perfect time to not only let it fully rest and heal, but then put structures into place that are actually going to make you better when you come back and then have to start implementing more of that endurance, kind of repeated steps, repeated, movement patterns over and over and over, which can exacerbate those injuries when they, do happen.
And this is another reason why athletes need a coach in the off season too,
Mm-hmm.
because it is very easy to get lost. It's very easy to allow that amount of time that you go uncoached to do either dumb stuff, incorrect stuff,
Yeah.
or no stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I really, most of my athletes stick with me throughout the course of a full year and continue to go. And I look for athletes that do that on purpose. And the reason why is because, one, I'm able to continue to move them to their long-term goals.
Mm-hmm.
But two, when I never really had this point, well, okay, I get you back. I get to now spend the next 4 or 5 weeks to get you back into shape or whatever it
Right.
might be. The other thing is I just had one athlete step away. It's like I just want to kind of have the openness of the off season to myself, and I'll come back first part of the year. Well, he calls me 4 weeks later. He increased his run volume a little too much, and next thing you know, there's a bone stress fracture.
Ah,
And hey, I'm coming back on because I now need the guidance of
right.
the other two sports. But it would have been one thing that we probably would have never ever had to worry about. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
of course, there's going to be things that pop up, but I don't think it would have been presented to this athlete if we would have just stayed on course and continued to move forward. So, and I do think this is why it's extremely important to kind of maintain that guidance and the overseeing of a coach in the off season, just because they're gonna keep you out of trouble in a lot of cases, but they're also
Yeah.
gonna give you whether it's now a mobility focus or some of these
Hmm.
other things that we can do, as you said, we're going to start to re-solidify the foundation. So therefore, when we get back to building the house on top of your fitness foundation, that house is going to be bigger. It's going to be more functional. It's going to have better results at the end too.
Right. Yeah. And I think this is something, and you just talked about it, but this is something I want to double down on is the value of a good coach isn't just to write you a training plan, right? Yeah, if all you want out of somebody is just a training plan, just Google beginner's training plan or something like that, and you'll get a training plan. The value of a coach is to talk to you, to listen to you, to change the training plan on a daily basis based on your goals, based on how you're feeling, based on the stress of life, based on whatever other feedback that they're taking in. And that's what really makes a good coach. So by having a coach all year round, you there's less of a possibility of you doing stupid stuff because left to my own devices, I do stupid shit all the time. And that winds up in Achilles injuries. That winds up in, like hamstring pulls, like other stuff like that. Whereas if I had, like a voice of reason, to bounce ideas off of, they'd be like, I understand where you're going with this, Phil. But as opposed to going from, like a 10K to like 10K volume to marathon volume, maybe we just bump it up to like 12K volume, something like that, right? Um, so it's just I think we as humans, and I'm speaking from personal experience, are really bad at evaluating for the most part what our capabilities are and what our capabilities are to do things safely. And by having a coach who, their whole goal is to get you to the start line healthy, should be to get you to the start line healthy and perform your absolute best, like they're going to have a little bit of a different lens on, well, this is what I think this person's capabilities are. This is what I think they should be doing. And again, when it comes to the off season, having a coach, you know, just because Aaron is really, like specialized in kind of like the triathlon space doesn't mean he can't program for you, like a 10K race plan or a strength training race plan or have people that he knows that could help you, like get like prehab, like a hamstring injury, or something along those lines. Right. So again, that's what I see the value of a coach being, and keeping them on board, not only when you're about to race, but, just kind of, having that touch point throughout the year, I think is extremely valuable.
Agreed 100%. And I mean, just like you said, I mean, my, I don't do a whole lot of reading, but I can read textbooks.
Hmm.
And my current reading right now is myofascial trigger points and dysfunction. So it's not like not normal people like read that, but
Yeah.
I see, and I think I've told you, like I don't get enjoyment out of reading books, but I do read things that can translate back to either myself or my
Hmm.
athletes. And what this book is showing is that hey, there are points along these muscles and areas that can result back to a couple of pinpoints within that muscle. This can give me, like, I have one athlete who we're now throwing in some flossing and some other things
Mm.
into her rehab in the off season to get her more functional and allow her to get better of herself. And it's from me taking the time to read books like that and get more diversified in my knowledge and stay up with new technologies and new uh, rehab principles as well. And
Hmm.
it's most coaches can, like you said, I mean, most coaches have the capability to draw up plans for a variety of different types of events. Whether, hey, I want to do some gravel racing. I
Yeah.
mean, if we're so there's just a lot of different things. So allowing the coach to really utilize the skills that they have to draw you up a plan, keep you still somewhat focused,
Hmm.
keep you in some movement pattern principles, and keep you kind of moving towards the ultimate goals that you still have as a human being.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll also say that I think what I've found is that when you have very large, say, fluctuations in stress, whether it's going from extremely high stress to extremely low stress or extremely low stress to extremely high stress, those are the times, those huge fluctuations, those are the times where you have a greater propensity to get sick, to get injured, to have other things like that occur. So those I think are actually like the most important points, to have somebody who's kind of guiding you, one way or the other, saying, hey, like, I understand that we just totally want to, like kind of just like completely shut off and other things like that, but maybe we should just ramp it down a little bit slower or more gradually, and then we can bring it back up more gradually. Because again, like I don't know if it's just me or if you guys have also noticed this sort of stuff, but I have a tendency to get sick, especially when I was doing my PhD. It was at the end of a semester, at the beginning of a semester, when the stress was either ramping up like crazy or going away like crazy. So for some reason, it's those fluctuations in stress, and it's the same thing I think with training. Is when you ramp up too fast, you can have a tendency to get injured. When you just completely just cut everything out, even people kind of, most people don't get sick during a taper, but they feel weird during a taper. But if you just like go to the end of your season and then you just stop everything, like that's going to create some significant fluctuation in like the amount of stress that's happening in your body. And then, from there, that can actually throw off a lot of other things. So this is
When
where
you're also going into the colder months, you're going to, I mean, most of the individuals we're probably communicating with or talking to have children, and they're bringing home gosh knows what. So, I mean, there is some validity to what you just said in that case, that keeping your immune system as high as you possibly can as well through those months where people are a little bit more susceptible to different types of illnesses and colds and COVID and whatever else that laundry list can be. It's important to try to mitigate that as much as you possibly can. And these are the areas that are just going to assist with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess like another thing that just came to mind too is I think a lot of people, or some of the reasons why some people won't take, an off season or time off, is because they're so worried that they're going to lose all their fitness. Oh, well, if I take time off, everything's going to go away. And what I want to tell you is a couple of things. Number one, if you are truly worried about fitness and you keep that 2 hours of exercise, and it, whether it's doing a hike or doing some strength training or whatever it is, you're going to mitigate that decrease in fitness. Absolutely, coming out of it, you're not going to be as fit as you were, towards the end of your A race, sort of peak of the season, but you're going to mitigate a lot of that reduction in fitness or worry of fitness. Two, if you stay active, you're going to be able to get it back really, really fast, because the amount you've fallen isn't that far, and you've probably maintained a lot of the structures. So your body is primed to get back into shape. And then three, there's studies out there that show, like, say, for example, with it was like with elite level soccer players, they were doing a bunch of VO2 max work because they were interested in improving their VO2 max towards the end of the season. So they were doing it 3 times a week. They were doing these VO2 max workouts. In the off season, it was like 6 to 8 weeks. They did one shorter VO2 max workout per week, and they were still able to maintain, say, their VO2 max for the entirety of that off season. So you don't actually need a ton of, say, very high intense work, other workouts, other things like that to keep the wheel rolling. As long as you keep the momentum, then keeping that wheel spinning is fairly straightforward. And by keeping that wheel spinning, you're going to maintain a lot of, the things you built up throughout the season. It's not just going to go away.
And it's very likely that when you come back, you're actually going to start to absorb that training a little bit
right,
more efficiently as well. Because, I mean, you are, as you said, we don't want to dramatically change the stress, but we are minimally changing that stress load, hopefully down.
Mm-hmm.
So then when we start to throw stress back into the body, that's going to be opportunity for improvements also to take place. So it has kind of that ability to slingshot you a little bit further than where you actually even backed off at that point. When you come back, it's going to hopefully kind of get you not just to the same spot. You'll get to that same spot, but then you'll elevate from that spot.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, like one of the points of kind of like the off season is you've been beating yourself up for, however many months of training that you've been doing. By beating yourself up, you're essentially, kind of poking holes in your foundation. Maybe your recovery ability is going down a little bit. You're not maximizing, like psychologically, you're not maximizing your workouts and those sort of things. And by taking this time off, by reestablishing, both the psychological and the physiological, parts of your body, you're then able, when you come back, to actually grow to an even higher level than you were towards the end of that season. So, I mean, overall, like that, we're trying to keep this episode pretty short. So, overall, my big takeaways here are that, with the off season, talk to your coach, try to figure out, depending on your goals for the next season, what seems to be appropriate for an off season. Is it 3 weeks? Is it 4 weeks? Do we need to shift our focus maybe to running and training for a 10K for, 6 to 8 weeks or something along those lines, maybe a half marathon, maybe focusing on, like a nagging injury, maybe doing some strength training, maybe just having some unstructured training so you can psychologically get back into, the training that is going to occur later on. So start with that. Focus on, determining new goals for the next season based on where you're at and how the last season went. Also, reflect on how the last season went, what worked, what didn't work, what should you maybe tweak and change going forward. And then really use this time to kind of diversify your portfolio of training methodologies, because I think that doing things that are slightly different from what you normally do can actually help make you more resilient, especially during the off season.
And the other piece is probably a piece of that reflecting on things that you maybe said that you wanted to do during the season, but because you were in the middle of a big block, either yourself or your coach decided, it's probably not the best time to throw on another log on the fire.
Mm-hmm.
It just could be a good time to start to implement some of those things. And if you start them at this point where we do have the decreased volume and intensity, you can then progress to holding that on through the course of the season. So there's times where I have athletes that say, hey, I'd like to start picking up some strength training. Okay, right now is probably not the best time, but we stick it in at this point and then we can start to do it. And then that athlete is doing that strength training leading into the point where they maybe asked that question the year before where you said no, but you're able to continue to do it because we now have, again, that foundation with that built in, and we can still do the other type of work. So if there's other things that you've recognized through the course of the season that you said, hey, I'd like to do that. I'd like to do that. But right now might not be the best time.
Yeah.
Right now in that off season is the right time. So when I think that that's another thing to evaluate is maybe put some of those things that you've held off in the middle of the season.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is also a time, just to go off of that, to maybe experiment a little bit with different things that, say you are interested in, right? Not like go completely off the deep end and just like, do a bunch of random stuff. But if it is the strength training that you want to do, if it is, getting a mobility routine built into your training, it's a good time to build new habits because, you have that unstructured training. You have the opportunity for the next, 3 to 6 to 8 weeks to build up those habits every single day. And we know that habits are only built by repetition of doing that thing. And then once you actually get into the season, you're already going to have, overcome any of the challenges that you were to face while building that habit. And now you'll be able to hopefully continue that or figure out ways that you can implement it on top of the training that you're actually doing. So, Yeah, Aaron, anything else you want to touch on with this? I think this is, this is like as succinct as we've ever been.
I don't agree with that.
Maybe as succinct as I've ever been when thinking about a topic. He's thinking and he's shaking his head, ladies and gentlemen.
But just don't skimp on this time, because it is very important. And again, just because we say off season, stop working out, to me is not an option.
Right.
So continue, it can take different forms. So I think those are the two main points that I kind of want to drill home, is just recognize that you might not directly think that you need a little bit of time, or you need to step away, or you need to refresh, but it's inevitable. You have to. And I mean, most people get burnt out of their job because they, like, in school we're taught, hey, you get the summers off, or you get these like weeks off, and when you go into the real life world, I got to do this stuff every day. I get how many days of vacation? What the heck? This is your vacation. So, look at it from that perspective. The reason why you probably shouldn't be working every single day of every year for a decade or 3 or 9 or whatever it might be for you. This is just that opportunity to just kind of step away, revitalize, get into other things, and enjoy the process.
Yep. And then all of that, kind of relaxation and mentality reset will then help you get back onto it once you get back into training the following year. So hopefully then it'll make it more enjoyable. You'll have better outcomes, those sort of things. If you guys do have any extra questions or any other questions like that on, your upcoming off season, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at Critical02, like always. If it's kind of shorter answers and stuff like that, I'm more than happy to answer them via DMs. But if it's, more of like, hey, how would I structure my own off season? I also offer physiological consulting and coaching consults. So you can reach out to me. We can book an hour-long conversation all about that sort of stuff, and I can kind of act as a surrogate coach, at least for the hour that we would have. I'm not sure if Aaron's actually taken on more athletes, but if you're, looking to getting a more serious coaching sort of gig, I know EndurIQ has a bunch of coaches, including Aaron, who do a really, really good job. We saw it at how well represented they were in, Ironman Kona. They were really well represented in Ironman Nice for the World Championships, and I'm sure you guys are pretty well represented in New Zealand as well for the
45.
45,
right
holy crap. So yeah, if go check out EndurIQ, reach out to Aaron at Aaron Geiser on Instagram. And then if you guys have any questions, any topics, whether it's training related, physiology related, you can always find me on Instagram. That's where I typically do, my answering of questions. You can comment down below if you're on YouTube. You can comment down below even if you're on Spotify nowadays. Leave us a 5-star review if you've been enjoying these episodes. We hope you enjoyed this episode all about, how to approach your off season and make an effective off season. And we'll catch you guys in the next one.